Good evening, everyone. Today I would like to address an important topic that affects us all: racism against black Americans in our society. Racism is like a disease that eats away at the fabric of our society, but we can work together to eradicate it. First, let us examine the causes of racism against black African Americans. Racism is based on ignorance, fear, and bias. Throughout history, black African Americans have faced discrimination just because of their skin color and everything else. Slavery, segregation, and systemic oppression have all contributed to the deeply ingrained biases that still exist up to this moment. These biases are frequently the result of stereotypes and misconceptions spread by the media, institutions, and individuals. Before we dig into the impact of racism itself, let us understand its historical roots. Racism against black African Americans in America, especially, is deeply ingrained in the history. From the arrival of the enslaved Africans in the 17th century to the present, black Americans have faced centuries of systemic oppression and discrimination. Slavery, a dark stain on American history, forced millions of Africans to this country's shores. They were denied their freedom, treated as property, and subjected to unspeakable cruelty. Even after slavery was abolished, black Americans continued to face institutionalized racism in the form of Jim Crow laws that enforced segregation and denied them basic rights and opportunities. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s marked an important turning point in the fight against racism, with brave individuals such as Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks leading the charge for equality and justice. Despite the significant progress, racism persisted in more damaging forms, including housing discrimination, voter suppression, and police brutality. In recent years, high-profile incidents of police violence against black Americans, such as the death of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, and George Floyd, have sparked widespread outrage and a national reckoning with racism. These tragic events have forced us to face the fact that racism is no longer a relic of the past, but rather a perceived and urgent issue that continues to plague our society. So now let's look into the impacts of this rooted racism over black African Americans. The impact of racism are far-reaching and devastating. It has impact on all aspects of a person's lives, including education, employment, healthcare, and housing. Black Americans are more likely than whites faced to poverty, violence, and also injustice. Racism-related trauma can have long-term consequences for one's mental health, self-esteem, and overall well-being. Furthermore, racism undermines the principles of equality and justice, sustaining a cycle of inequality over generations to generations. So, what can we done to end racism and promote equality for Black Americans? It begins with education and awareness. We must educate ourselves about the history of racism and its consequences for our society. Recognizing our own biases and privileges allows us to begin to dismantle the oppressive systems that support racism. Furthermore, we speak out against racism in all of its manifestations, whether over acts of discrimination or subtle microaggression. Furthermore, I require systemic change to address the roots of racism. This includes reforming the criminal justice system, investing in marginalized communities, and advocating for policies that prioritize equity and inclusion. We must also support organizations and initiatives that promote racial justice and empowerment for Black Americans by advocating for change at the local, state, national level, and also international levels. We can build a more just and equitable society for all of us. In conclusion, racism against Black Americans is a deeply entrenched issue that requires collective action to address. Understanding the cause and history, acknowledging the implication, and putting recommendation into action will help us work towards the implication, towards a future in which everyone, regardless of skin color, is treated with dignity and respect. Let us stand together in solidarity against racism and create better tomorrow for our future generation. I believe in our hand that I'm sure we can do it. Thank you.